The night shift is supposed to be quiet. The world outside sleeps, the streets are empty, and you convince yourself that nothing bad can happen. But the truth is, when the lights dim and the clock creeps past midnight, that's when the monster Schumann or otherwise begin to move. Imagine working alone, the silence so heavy you can hear your own heartbeat when a stranger steps inside. Sometimes they smile too much, sometimes they ask the wrong questions, sometimes they know your name without you ever telling them, and sometimes they don't come alone. They wait in the shadows, they follow you to your car, they lure you outside with promises of safety or even easy money. 3 people lived through the kind of terror most of us only see in horror movies, and their stories will make you rethink every shift you've ever worked past dark. Welcome to The Price Paid, where real nightmares are told. If you dare to keep watching, subscribe now, because what you're about to hear may change the way you look at the night forever. I never thought much about working the night shift until it nearly cost me my life. My name is Cadence, and I used to believe that a small dive bar could be one of the safest places in town. The bar was nothing fancy, a dimly lit place tucked just off the highway, where regulars greeted each other by name, and the jukebox cycled through the same tired rotation of classic rock. Most nights were predictable. Truckers would stop in for a drink, locals would chat over their beers, and the occasional lost traveler would stumble in for directions or a stiff shot before continuing their drive. I liked the routine. It was quiet enough to manage, the tips were decent, and I had learned how to handle every kind of bar patron you could imagine. But the nights I worked alone were different. On weeknights, I was the only one behind the counter. No barback, no coworker, just me in the shadows stretching across the empty stools. It was after 1 a.m. on a Tuesday when I first saw him. He did not look like anyone who belonged in a place like ours. If I had to guess, he was in his late 40s, with clean-cut features and perfectly combed hair, wearing a black turtleneck beneath a trench coat. He carried himself with posture so sharp it felt unnatural. When he ordered, he asked for top shelf without hesitation, the kind of drink our regulars would never waste money on. He smiled when he asked if I enjoyed working there, and though the question seemed innocent, I remember the way his eyes lingered too long. Something about him felt rehearsed, like a man who had practiced being approachable. I smiled back anyway, joked about bartending life, and kept the conversation polite. There was no flirting, no suggestive comments, nothing that screamed danger. If anything, he seemed like a charming single dad, the type of guy who clapped for every kid at a little league game. But just as quickly as he appeared, he asked what time I finished my shift. The question caught me off guard, not because it was unusual, but because it came with a strange confidence, like he already knew the answer. I brushed it off, gave a vague reply, and returned to wiping down the bar. He finished his drink, left a crisp $100 bill on the counter, and disappeared into the night. I told myself it was odd, but harmless. I was wrong. A week later, he returned, and this time he was not alone. The woman beside him immediately drew my attention. She looked mid-30s, dressed too young for her age, trendy, but just a little off, like she had studied how to blend in but missed the details. Her smile was bright, forced, and when she leaned against the bar, her body language screamed performance. The very first thing she said to me was not hello or a drink order. She told me I was pretty, brushing her fingers across my arm just a second too long. I laughed politely, but unease began to coil in my stomach. She ordered drinks for the both of them and began her questions. How long had I been working there? How old was I? Did I ever think about doing something more exciting? Her tone was playful, but her eyes were studying me, calculating. Then she leaned in and whispered about an exclusive private club. She told me I could make $10,000 in a single weekend. She used words like fun, safe, exclusive, and she smiled so wide that it almost looked painful. She wanted me to step outside and meet someone who could explain more. The moment she said it, my pulse spiked. I did not play along. I told her firmly I was not interested. And then, almost like fate intervened, a group of laughing customers walked in. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second before she turned to the man, and together they slipped out. I convinced myself it was just a bizarre encounter, but the paranoia set in soon after. A few nights later, I noticed a car parked across the street after closing. The engine was off, but the silhouette of someone sitting inside was visible. When I left for my own car, the vehicle pulled out and began following me. I turned randomly through side streets, each time checking my mirrors. The car stayed behind, just far enough not to look suspicious, but close enough for me to know. My chest tightened until I finally swerved into the lot of a police station. The car sped off into the night. I thought maybe that would be the end of it, but it was not. Another slow night, almost closing time, and she returned. She walked in alone, hands folded neatly, that same artificial smile painted on her face. My stomach twisted, but I tried to stay calm as I texted my boss. She asked for a drink, making a pouty face when I told her we were about to close. I decided pouring her an old-fashioned would buy me time until my boss arrived. That is when I heard it, the soft click of the door closing behind me. I turned and she was gone. Through the glass, I saw a black van idling, headlights dim. The back door rattled violently. Someone was trying to break in. I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, a metal shaker, and dialed 911 with trembling fingers. I considered running out the front, but something in my gut screamed not to. Then headlights flashed across the lot. My boss had arrived. The rattling at the back door stopped instantly, and the van peeled away with a screech. The police reviewed the footage. It was worse than I thought. The cameras captured two masked figures crouching near the front entrance, waiting for me to run. Another had been at the back, pounding against the door. They had been planning to drive me into their trap. The license plate my boss recorded was unregistered. The trail ended there. I still work at that bar, but never alone again. Even now, I think about the woman's voice urging me to step outside, about the car that followed me home, about how close I came to vanishing into the night without a trace. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if those customers had not walked in at the right moment, or if my boss had not arrived in time. The scariest part is knowing they are still out there, watching, waiting for someone else to take the bait. I used to think the gas station where I worked was the safest kind of night shift job. It set off a quiet stretch of highway, the kind of place most drivers pass without even noticing. On paper, it was simple work. Restock shelves, wipe down counters, ring up the rare customer who wandered in after midnight. Nothing about it felt dangerous, at least not until that night. After what happened, I promised myself I would never work another night shift again. It was just after 2:30 in the morning, the kind of hour when the world feels hollow and endless. Even the truckers had mostly dried up by then, leaving me alone with the buzzing neon sign outside and the faint hum of the coolers behind me. I stepped out for some air, rubbing my hands together against the cold. The parking lot was empty, just the silent pumps, the road stretching off into the dark, and a wall of trees beyond. The air was heavy with mist, so thick I could see it swirling under the flickering lights. I was about to go back inside when I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye. At first, I thought maybe it was an animal or my imagination, but when I turned my head, there was a man standing behind one of the pumps. He wore a dark red hoodie with the hood pulled up, hands buried deep in his pockets. There was no car near him, no reason for him to be at the pumps at all. He was not moving toward the store either. He was just standing there, half turned toward me, as though he had been watching the whole time. A prickle of unease slid down my spine. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was waiting for someone, maybe his car was parked just out of sight. But the way he shifted his weight in small circles, pacing but not leaving, made my stomach twist. I stepped inside, locking eyes on him through the glass, pretending to scroll through my phone. I hoped another customer would pull in, anything to break the tension. After a few minutes, he started walking toward the door, slow at first, then with sudden purpose, like he had made up his mind. He pushed inside and came up to the counter without saying anything. He just stared, his eyes fixed on me as though weighing something. When he finally spoke, his words tumbled out quickly, almost rehearsed. He said his car had broken down just before the pumps, that he needed a jump or a little gas to make it to the next town. His story did not make sense. His tone was flat but urgent, and I could not believe he thought it was convincing. I offered to call a tow truck. He shook his head too fast. No, he said he just needed a flashlight, maybe some help checking under the hood. The way he spoke felt like a test. He wanted to see if I would leave the counter. I asked where his car was parked. He told me it was just beyond the highway entrance.
Listen carefully.
For a moment, doubt crept in. People who come in at that hour are often strange. Maybe he really did need help and was just awkward. But when he pointed at the monitor behind me, telling me to look, my blood ran cold. On the screen, a car sat parked in the darkness. I thought maybe he is telling the truth. But then I remembered I had just been outside. There had been no car. My eyes flicked back to the monitor and caught the faintest movement near the car's bumper. Someone was crouching just out of view. A wave of dread crashed over me so hard my knees nearly buckled. I forced a casual smile and told him I needed to grab my phone from the back office before helping him. The second I was out of his direct sight, I slammed my hand onto the emergency panic button under the counter. The alarm shrieked through the store like a banshee. I braced for him to lunge at me. But instead, something even more chilling happened. His nervous energy vanished. The fake urgency, the shuffling feet, all of it dropped away. He relaxed, his shoulders rolling back, his face smoothing into a slow, knowing grin. Not embarrassed, not panicked, amused. Like he had been playing a game, and I had just spoiled it. Without a word, he turned and bolted for the door. I ran to the monitors just in time to see him and another figure take off. Not toward the car, but into the woods behind the station. The car sat there, with its engine off and headlights dark, like a prop left behind after a performance. By the time the police arrived, it was exactly as I had seen it. The car was still there, but the men were gone. No footprints leading away, no sign of anyone anywhere. Then one of the officers pointed at something I had not noticed before. The front passenger door was open. Someone else had been inside the whole time. They towed the car and ran the plates. It had been reported stolen nearly a week earlier, over 100 miles away. No one came forward to claim it. No reports of missing persons, no other crimes linked to it. Just an abandoned vehicle on the edge of the highway, and 3 people who had vanished into the trees. For weeks afterward, I kept replaying the scene in my head. The man's rehearsed story. The crouching shadow near the bumper. The way his smile changed when the alarm went off. I wondered if I had walked out to help him. Would they have dragged me into the woods? Was there a van waiting somewhere nearby? Every time I drove past that station after quitting, I felt the same chill crawl over my skin. I could still see the mist hanging in the air. The red hoodie. The empty pumps. It is strange how a place you once thought of as harmless can turn into a memory that haunts you. That night taught me something about predators. They do not always rush. They wait. They build a scene, bait their hook, and see who will step outside. I was lucky enough to break the script, but someone else might not be. Working the night shift at Walmart always felt monotonous to me. The store was so brightly lit that time seemed to blur, the aisles stretching on forever in that artificial glow. I stocked electronics mostly. Shelves of phone chargers, headphones, and Bluetooth speakers that rarely sold after midnight. The routine lulled me into a rhythm that felt mechanical. I would tell myself it was easy money, just ride out the hours until the sun rose. But then one night I realized how quickly the familiar can turn into a nightmare. At first, I noticed a man wandering the aisles nearby. I did not think much of it. Customers came in at odd hours all the time, either restless night owls or truckers stopping in for last-minute supplies. But after several minutes, it became obvious he was not shopping. He was not even pretending to. Every time I glanced up, he was there. Sometimes near the clearance racks, sometimes a few aisles over, always standing a little too still. He would pick something up only to set it down untouched, his eyes flicking toward me instead of the product. I told myself I was overreacting, that maybe he was just slow, maybe waiting for someone. But then my radio crackled uselessly, batteries dead, and suddenly the distance between me and the rest of the store felt enormous. The longer I ignored it, the closer he seemed to drift. It was subtle, but deliberate, as if he wanted me to notice him without ever making direct contact. My stomach nodded with the certainty that this was not coincidence. Then it happened. A hand clamped down on my arm. I nearly screamed, but before I could, a woman's cheerful voice rang out. "There you are," she exclaimed, as though we were long-lost friends reunited. She smiled warmly, gripping my arm firmly while launching into some rambling story about looking for me all over. My pulse was racing too fast to process her words. I turned to see her face, a stranger's face, but her act was convincing enough that for a split second I almost believed it. She leaned in close, her tone dropping to a whisper. "That man is recording you," she said urgently. My heart sank. I dared to glance over my shoulder, and there he was, standing a few feet away, eyes fixed on me. He was not pretending anymore. He was not browsing or pacing. He was staring directly at me, his hand holding a phone just slightly too low. My skin crawled. The woman pulled me along with her, keeping up her act as though we were old friends catching up. Her grip was strong, her smile too wide, her words flowing easily. I clung to the comfort of not being alone, grateful that someone had stepped in. She guided me quickly down the aisles, chattering loudly about some imaginary vacation we had taken, an inside joke I was supposed to remember. I barely heard her. My mind was stuck on the man behind us, his eyes, the possibility that he was following. As she pulled me further, I expected her to steer us toward the registers or a manager's desk. Instead, I realized we were moving in the opposite direction, past the registers, past the busier aisles, toward the dimly lit warehouse area. The exit loomed ahead, the one employees used for shipments, the one with no cameras. That was when the truth slammed into me. She was not saving me. She was leading me out. I dug my heels in, twisting my arm against her grip. "You can let go now," I said, forcing my voice steady. Her smile did not fade. "Just a little further," she urged, tugging me harder. Panic surged through me. I shouted for help, my voice cracking in the stillness of the empty aisles. She clung tighter for a moment, but I wrenched free with all the strength I had. Without looking back, I sprinted toward the front of the store, lungs burning. Behind me, her voice rang out, sharp and startling. She called for me to come back. Then she called my name. My real name. The sound of it froze me in place for half a heartbeat. I had not told her who I was. Somehow she already knew. That terror pushed me faster. I barreled forward until I spotted a coworker running toward me, alarmed by my screams. I gasped out what happened, pointing behind me, but the woman was gone. Security was called immediately. They combed the footage, and what they found made my blood run cold. The woman and the man had entered together. The man's face was caught clearly on one of the cameras, but hers was always turned away, as if she knew exactly where the blind spots were. It had been orchestrated, every step of it, from the man stalking me to the woman playing rescuer. The police were notified. They confirmed it was an attempted abduction, a planned scenario designed to isolate me. The most disturbing part was how much information they already seemed to know. Her use of my name was no accident. I was not a random target. They had come prepared. For weeks afterward, I could not step foot in that store without feeling my throat tighten. Every aisle felt like a trap, every stranger's smile a threat. I kept wondering what would have happened if I had trusted her completely, if I had let her drag me out that door. There is no question in my mind that I would not have come back. Even now, I replay the moment her cheerful mask slipped, the pressure of her hand on my arm, the way she whispered in my ear like an ally. It was all performance, a script designed to make me lower my guard. I still ask myself how she knew my name. Was she following me before that night? Had they been watching me longer than I realized? The night shift is supposed to be monotonous. Hours of stacking shelves, tidying displays, waiting for morning. But sometimes, hidden within that monotony, are people waiting for you to let your guard down. And sometimes, the ones who seem to save you are the very ones who want to take you away. There is something about the night shift that changes the way you see the world. At first, it seems harmless. You tell yourself that darkness is just a backdrop, that the silence is peaceful. You convince yourself that working alone is no different than working in the daytime, except quieter. But then the hours drag on, the clock ticks slower, and the emptiness presses down until the smallest sound makes your skin crawl. The night shift has a way of exposing vulnerabilities that daylight hides, and for those of us who have lived through it, the fear never leaves. What ties the stories together is not coincidence. The bartender in the dive bar, the clerk in the gas station, the worker at Walmart, each of them faced something that should not have been possible but was. The strangers who entered their lives were not random.
Sarah.
They were deliberate, calculated, coordinated. They studied routines. They waited for the right moment. They created situations that forced choices. The man in the bar who left a $100 bill was not being generous. He was establishing contact, testing boundaries. The woman beside him did not smile because she was friendly. She smiled because it was a mask, a disguise meant to lure. The red-hooded man at the pumps did not stumble in by accident. He rehearsed a story and waited for someone to follow him outside. The woman in Walmart did not grab an arm to protect, but to direct, leading someone into the shadows. Each story is different in detail, but identical in structure. It begins with isolation. A person working alone, cut off from backup, distracted by routine. It escalates with the appearance of someone who seems out of place, a stranger whose presence is strange but not immediately threatening. Then comes the offer or the request. A drink, a question, a plea for help, a hand reaching out. That is the moment the trap is set. Some refuse, some hesitate, some go along. But the design is always the same. Create a choice that leads into danger and wait for the target to take the bait. It is what comes after that haunts people. The bartender did not just meet a strange couple. She realized later they had followed her, tracked her schedule, learned when she would be alone. The gas station clerk did not just see a man in a hoodie. He realized too late that there were others hidden, watching, waiting in the trees. The Walmart employee did not just hear her name called. She realized that someone she had never met already knew who she was, had studied her long before that night. These are not isolated encounters. They are evidence of predators who know how to wait, how to weave fear into opportunity, how to vanish when exposed. What makes the night shift so dangerous is not the darkness itself, but what it hides. In the day, everything feels visible. Coworkers, customers, noise, life. At night, the walls feel thinner, the exits further away, the silence heavier. One person walking through the door changes everything. You are forced to measure every word, every movement. Is this person harmless, or is this the moment you disappear? Those who have lived through it know the weight it leaves behind. Even long after the incidents, paranoia lingers. The bartender still wonders about the car that followed her, if it will one day return. The clerk still sees the mist in the air, imagines shadows crouching by abandoned vehicles. The Walmart worker still hears her name whispered in a stranger's mouth and feels the grip on her arm. The memories become ghosts that follow them through every shift, even in daylight. The fear does not vanish because the questions remain unanswered. Who were they? What did they want? Why her? Why then? Why there? It is tempting to dismiss stories like these as exaggerations, the stuff of horror movies stretched into real life, but the details are too precise, the patterns too exact. These are not chance encounters. These are tactics. Criminals and predators understand what night shifts mean. They mean one person standing alone, distracted, unguarded, trapped in a routine. And the most terrifying part is that there are no neat conclusions. The bartender's attackers vanished into the night. The gas station strangers fled into the woods. The Walmart woman slipped away unseen. No arrests, no closure, no justice, just silence and the knowledge that they are still out there. What lingers after all of this is the lesson. The night shift is not safe simply because nothing usually happens. It is dangerous because when something does happen, there is no one to help. That is why these stories matter. They remind us that danger does not always look like danger.
Jamie.
Sometimes it looks like a well-dressed man leaving a generous tip. Sometimes it looks like a stranger asking for help. Sometimes it looks like a friendly woman pretending to know your name. The face of fear at night is often disguised as kindness. The night shift changes people. It makes them wary, cautious, alert to every detail. The creak of a door, the flicker of lights, the shadow moving just beyond the edge of vision. These things become signals, warnings, reminders of how fragile safety truly is. Those who work through the night carry that awareness long after they leave. They know what others do not. That sometimes when the world is sleeping, predators are awake, and they are waiting for someone like you. That is the reality that binds these stories together. Not coincidence, not imagination, but a pattern that repeats itself in countless forms, in countless towns, in countless lonely places where people work while others dream. And for every story that ends with survival, there are others we may never hear because the night swallowed them whole. The stories of the bartender, the gas station clerk, and the Walmart worker are not random tales told to entertain. They are warnings, each one a glimpse into the quiet dangers that hide in the long hours of the night shift. What unites them is not just the time or the setting, but the deliberate way predators stalked, studied, and struck when they believed their targets were most vulnerable. These are not coincidences. They are carefully planned attempts to exploit people who are isolated, distracted, and unprotected. The bartender thought she was serving an unusual but harmless customer, only to realize he and his partner had been building a trap around her life. The gas station clerk believed he was dealing with a broken-down driver, only to realize the car was bait and others were hiding in the shadows. The Walmart worker almost believed the woman who grabbed her arm was saving her, only to realize she was being led into an ambush. In every case, the predators worked in pairs or groups. In every case, they created situations that forced decisions. In every case, escape depended on a moment of clarity, a refusal to step into the snare. The lesson is simple but urgent. Do not assume that night shift danger looks like a masked figure with a weapon. More often, it looks like kindness, like a smile, like an opportunity that seems too good to be true. Predators know that if they appear threatening, their victims will run. So they disguise themselves. They pretend to be lost, or generous, or helpful, or even protective. They build trust just long enough to create a window where you let your guard down. That is the moment they strike. For anyone who works nights, the best defense is vigilance. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Never step outside with strangers, no matter how convincing their story. Do not give out personal information, no matter how harmless the questions seem. Make sure your workplace has working security systems, panic buttons, and backup you can reach quickly. And above all, never underestimate the value of simply saying no. The bartender survived because she refused to leave with them. The clerk survived because he triggered the alarm. The Walmart worker survived because she broke away and screamed. These stories remind us that the night is not empty. It is full of eyes that watch, footsteps that follow, and traps that wait. But they also remind us that survival is possible. Awareness, caution, and the refusal to be lured are what make the difference between a close call and something far worse. If you have ever worked a night shift, you know the unease, the silence that feels too heavy, the sense that you are being watched. And if you have never worked one, let these stories be the reason you never take safety for granted. The darkness is not harmless. It is patient. This is the price paid. Subscribe now, because the next story we tell might be the warning that saves you.